In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. On the desolate world of Halcyon-7, death reigns supreme. Ravaged by the horrors of both Tyranid bioforms and the vile corruption of chaos, the once thriving planet now teeters on the edge of annihilation. Imperial forces cling to survival, but the very ground beneath them is poisoned. The skies thick with rot, and the whispers of an ancient evil stir the hearts of the damned. Into this nightmare, a battle-hardened squad of Ultramarines is dispatched with a singular, impossible mission. Uncover the source of the corruption festering deep within the planet and stop it before all of Halcyon-7 is consumed. Led by the stoic and unyielding Brother-Sergeant Tyberius Ironheart Damas, they must face not only the monstrous Tyranid hordes and the grotesque forces of Nurgle, but something darker, hidden in the heart of the dying world. As their mission spirals into chaos, the Ultramarines are pushed to their breaking point. The line between duty and madness blurs, and the true cost of loyalty is revealed in a harrowing descent into the depths of corruption. Victory is uncertain, survival even less so. But in service to the Emperor, they will stand and they will fall.
Alright guys, so this is a continuation of the other Ultramarine one that I just posted. Same story. This is the second out of 4 parts. Each part has its own beginning, middle, and end. And then I'll post a, 4-part series all in one video later with some deleted scenes and stuff. Not a whole lot to say. If you'd like to support, you can buy me a coffee in the comments. You can also sign up for a membership. You get small little stuff, not a lot. I'm trying to get more stuff. Let me know if you have any ideas. If you want a story done, a very specific story done, there are membership tiers for a 10-minute, 15, and 20-minute long, or about that time. Maybe longer, maybe a little less, but probably longer. So you can sign up for those and you get 1 story a month. Also, I still have those stickers coming of the Sisters of Battle, and then the data cards and the 3D printed models are also coming. But that's about it. Please enjoy the story. Like, comment, subscribe. I am a little bit out of ideas, so if anyone wants to suggest a story, please do so. That would be great. Maybe I'll do a Carcharodon story. That might be fun. Alright, please like, comment, subscribe, share. Tell me what you want to see next. Tell me what you hear next. Enjoy. Alright, thank you so much. Talk to you guys.
The Thunderhawks roared through the ash-choked skies of Halcyon-7, their engines cutting through the oppressive atmosphere like blades. Inside the transports, the Ultramarines stood in grim silence, their armor gleaming in the dim, flickering light of the hold. The rhythmic hum of the dropships was punctuated by the occasional shudder as turbulence from the planet's war-torn atmosphere rattled their descent. Brother-Sergeant Tyberius Ironheart Damas watched through the narrow viewport as the surface of the planet loomed closer. It was worse than he had expected. The ground below was a nightmare, a writhing landscape of Tyranid bioforms and Nurgle's corruption, twisting the very earth into something unrecognizable. Fields of pus and bile oozed from ruptured mounds of diseased terrain, while spore towers belched clouds of toxins into the air, further blackening the sky. Even through the reinforced plating of the Thunderhawk, Tiberius could feel the malevolence rising from the planet's surface, like a wound festering beneath a thin layer of rot.
Prepare for deployment.
Tiberius ordered, his voice cold and steady, as the Thunderhawk made its final descent. The hatch hissed, and the harsh, toxic atmosphere of Halcyon-7 invaded the cabin. The smell hit first, a stench of rot, death, and decay, so thick that even the Ultramarines' advanced filtration systems could barely keep it at bay. The Thunderhawk touched down with a metallic thud, The ramp lowered, and the Ultramarines wasted no time. Tiberius led the charge, stepping into the nightmarish wasteland, his power armor hissing as it struggled to shield him from the planet's poisoned air.
Spread out.
Tiberius commanded.
Secure the landing zone.
Within seconds of disembarking, the squad was greeted by the enemy. Tyranid bioforms emerged from the mists, their grotesque insectoid shapes surging from the corruption, claws clicking and teeth gnashing. Hormagaunts, scuttling on all fours, moved with unnatural speed, their shrill screams cutting through the sound of bolter fire. Brother Kallidus' train, his heavy bolter already primed, let loose a thunderous barrage. Bolter rounds tore through the advancing Tyranids, shredding their carapaces, sending thick sprays of alien blood into the air.
Come on, you filth.
He bellowed, his voice a mixture of rage and battle fury. Tiberius unsheathed his power sword, its blade crackling with energy as he charged headlong into the fray. His strikes were precise, cleaving through Tyranid bodies with ease, the weapon cutting through flesh and bone as though it were nothing more than air. Around him, his squad fought with brutal efficiency, their movements a deadly dance of coordination and power. But for every Tyranid they cut down, more took its place. The swarm was relentless, a tide of claws, teeth, and chittering hunger. Above them, the Thunderhawk's guns roared, unleashing streams of fire into the biomass, but it did little to stem the tide. In the distance, the corrupted forms of Nurgle's abominations began to rise from the muck, their bloated bodies swelling with pus and disease. Their foul, bloated limbs dragged through the poisoned sludge, leaving trails of rot in their wake.
Focus fire.
Tiberius shouted, raising his blade to point at the approaching monstrosities.
Take them down before they reach the lines.
As the last of the Tyranids fell, the battlefield fell silent. The only sound was the distant crackle of lightning and the low, insidious hiss of Nurgle's pestilence in the air. The ground beneath them seemed to heave, as though something vast and terrible stirred beneath the surface. The very air seemed to attack them. Nurgle's corruption clung to everything, every surface, every breath. The atmosphere itself was thick with spores, turning the simple act of breathing into a battle. The Ultramarines' advanced filtration systems hissed and strained, their power armor working overtime to protect them from the noxious fumes. But even the Astartes were not immune to the slow, creeping death that the planet offered. The ground beneath them squelched with every step, a festering mix of Tyranid biomatter and Nurgle's rot. Everywhere they looked, the land itself seemed to rebel against their presence. Pustules swelled and burst underfoot, spewing clouds of toxic gas that hissed against their armor. The armor's systems struggled to compensate for the corrosive atmosphere, warning runes flickering on the HUD of each Ultramarine as their suits were pushed to their limits. Varnus knelt beside a fallen Tyranid, his eyes narrowing behind his visor.
This corruption, it's unnatural.
He muttered, his voice cold.
Nurgle's rot. It's everywhere, infecting everything, even the Tyranids.
He rose, his gauntleted hand brushing the air, as if sensing something unseen.
We should move quickly before this contagion worsens.
Tiberius nodded.
We'll push through, we have no choice.
Above them, the skies churned with black, toxic clouds, illuminated by flashes of green lightning that seemed to twist reality with every strike. The land itself was alive, shifting, warping, as if the very soul of Halcyon-7 had been claimed by Nurgle and twisted into a living, breathing nightmare. Tiberius paused, his power sword still crackling in his hand, his eyes scanning the horizon. There was something wrong. The Tyranids were relentless, mindless in their hunger, but they were not the true threat here. There was something darker, something unseen, that lurked just beyond their vision. He turned to Attalus, the brother librarian, who stood slightly apart from the rest. His eyes closed in concentration, his psychic senses reaching out into the warp.
What do you see, Attalus?
Tiberius asked, his voice low. Attalus opened his eyes, his face pale beneath his helm.
There is something here, Brother Sergeant. It watches us. The warp is alive in this place.
Tiberius tightened his grip on his sword.
We push forward. We'll face whatever comes.
The silence was unnerving. Even the Tyranid swarms seemed to have retreated into the shadows, leaving only the unnatural stillness that clung to the land. Tiberius could feel it in his bones. A storm was coming, and when it hit, they would be engulfed in darkness. The squad pressed onward, the corrupted landscape stretching out before them like a vision from hell. Every step was a battle. The terrain shifted beneath their feet, pools of toxic sludge bubbling up from the ground, their surfaces slick with the foul sheen of warp-tainted biomatter. Rotting forests, twisted and gnarled by Nurgle's touch, loomed around them, their branches dripping with pus and filth. The very land was a maze of death, each step a potential trap. Brother Sergeant Vornik's scout squad moved ahead, their lighter armor allowing them to navigate the treacherous terrain more quickly. But even they struggled against the constant threat posed by the environment.
The path is blocked.
Vornik's voice crackled over the vox.
We'll need to move around the sludge pools. It's too thick to pass through.
Tiberius cursed under his breath. The landscape itself was slowing them down. Every moment wasted here was a moment closer to whatever horror awaited them within the fortress of madness.
Push on.
Tiberius ordered.
Stay sharp. We'll find a way through.
They continued to advance, but the obstacles mounted. Crumbling ruins, their foundations rotted and eroded by time and corruption, threatened to collapse with every step. Strange, warp-tainted wildlife skittered through the undergrowth, their eyes glowing with malevolent energy. The land itself seemed to conspire against their progress, warping in response to their presence.
We're being watched.
Calidus muttered, his bolter raised as he scanned the twisted horizon.
I can feel it.
So can I.
Tiberius replied, his gaze fixed on the distant silhouette of the Fortress of Madness.
Whatever it is, it's waiting for us.
With every step, the weight of the planet's corruption pressed down on them, slowing their progress, clouding their minds. But they were Ultramarines. They would endure. They had no choice. The shattered remains and sounds of war echoed across the desolate wasteland of Halcyon-7 as the Ultramarines advanced, moving with precision and purpose through the war-torn terrain. The haze of toxic fumes and the perpetual storm of green lightning cast eerie shadows across the battlefield. Tiberius, Ironheart Damas, at the front of the squad, kept his eyes focused ahead, the weight of their mission heavy on his shoulders. The vox crackled. Brother-Sergeant Lucian Vornik's voice, filled with static and urgency, came through.
We've spotted movement ahead. Corrupted guardsmen. They're twisted, Brother Sergeant. Hold position.
Tiberius gave a sharp nod to his squad.
We move carefully,
he said, his voice low but firm.
Prepare for engagement.
The Ultramarines advanced cautiously, their bolters raised and ready. The corrupted terrain was alive with the buzzing of flies and the stench of decay. As they neared the ridge Vornik had indicated, the sight that greeted them was a twisted parody of their once loyal allies. A platoon of Imperial Guardsmen, once proud soldiers of the Emperor, stood before them, their bodies bloated and warped beyond recognition. Their armor was fused with their rotting flesh, pustules oozing from every joint. At their head was a commissar, grotesque and bloated, his once imposing figure now a mockery of imperial might. His once pristine coat was tattered and soaked in filth, his face a swollen mass of corruption, one eye bulging from his skull. The commissar raised a rotting las pistol, his voice a twisted gurgle of hatred.
"For the plague, father!"
he bellowed, and with that, the corrupted platoon charged, their movements erratic, driven by the sickness that had overtaken their minds.
Engage!
Tiberius roared, and the Ultramarines sprang into action. The battlefield exploded into chaos as bolter rounds tore through the air. Brother Calidus' train unleashed a devastating barrage with his heavy bolter, mowing down the front ranks of the corrupted guardsmen, their bodies bursting into foul clouds of pus and rot. The Ultramarines moved with precision, their years of training and discipline evident as they systematically cut down their foes. But these were not ordinary enemies. Their twisted forms seemed almost impervious to pain, rising again and again despite grievous wounds. Tiberius cleaved through a guardsman, his power sword cutting through flesh and bone with ease. But the sight of his former comrades twisted beyond recognition gnawed at him. This was not war. It was desecration. The Ultramarines fought with grim determination, but as they cut down the corrupted guardsmen, a deep unease settled over them. These were once their allies, loyal soldiers of the Imperium, now turned into grotesque puppets of Nurgle. Each kill felt like a betrayal, a violation of their oath to the Emperor. Tiberius slashed through another guardsman, his power sword humming with energy. The corrupted figure collapsed, gurgling a twisted prayer to the Plague Father as he died. Tiberius paused for a moment, staring down at the corpse, his heart heavy.
They were once men,
he muttered under his breath.
loyal to the Emperor.
We cannot dwell on that, Brother Sergeant,
came Calidus' voice, his bolter still roaring.
We must purge them or they will consume us.
Tiberius nodded grimly, knowing Calidus was right. But the weight of the mission bore down on him, as each death was a reminder of the fragility of loyalty and how easily it could be twisted by the horrors of the warp. Apothecary Varnus, however, seemed less affected by the sight of their corrupted comrades. As he moved through the battlefield, his cold, analytical eyes locked onto the mutations that had overtaken the guardsmen. His gauntleted hand traced the boils and lesions that covered a fallen soldier, his voice barely a whisper.
Fascinating,
He muttered.
The corruption is intricate. It's as if Nurgle's touch has rewoven their flesh entirely.
Tiberius shot him a sharp glance.
Stay focused, Apothecary,
He barked.
We have work to do.
But Varnus's fascination lingered, his mind beginning to stray into dangerous territory as he pondered the nature of Nurgle's corruption. The subtle shift in his demeanor was not lost on Tiberius, but there was no time to dwell on it now. The battle raged on, but despite their martial prowess, the emotional toll of fighting their former comrades began to weigh on the Ultramarines. Aetolus, the brother librarian, fought in silence, his psychic abilities keeping the warp at bay, but his mind was fraying under the weight of the corruption surrounding them. He could feel the whispers of Nurgle scratching at the edges of his thoughts, tempting him to give in, to let the rot take hold. Tiberius felt the same creeping doubt. Every blow he struck was a strike against what had once been loyal servants of the Emperor. He could see the hesitation in his brother's movements, the small, subtle delays as they processed the horror of their situation. As Tiberius fought through the fray, cutting down another plague-riddled guardsman, a figure loomed before him. The commissar, grotesque and bloated, towered over the battlefield, his las pistol raised.
You will join us.
The commissar gurgled, his voice dripping with the vile stench of rot. Tiberius didn't hesitate, With a swift, powerful strike, he drove his sword through the commissar's chest, the blade crackling as it cut through the diseased flesh. The commissar let out a final guttural scream before collapsing in a heap of filth. The battle was won, but the victory felt hollow. The squad stood amidst the bodies of the fallen, their bolters still smoking, the air thick with the stench of death and decay. Tyberius wiped the filth from his blade, his eyes scanning the battlefield, but all he saw were the twisted remains of men who had once been loyal. As the battle ended, a thick, unnatural silence fell over the field. The Ultramarines stood in the midst of the carnage, their armor splattered with the rotting filth of their enemies, the weight of their mission pressed down on them harder than ever. Tiberius activated his Vox link, his voice quiet but firm.
Vornik, report.
After a brief pause, Vornik's voice crackled through the static.
We're advancing on the next position, Brother Sergeant, but something isn't right. The air feels heavier. The corruption is growing stronger.
Tiberius clenched his jaw. Every step they took, every life they ended, seemed to fuel the malevolent presence that loomed over Halcyon-7. He could feel the chaos artifact pulling at the edges of his mind, a dark and insidious force lurking just beneath the surface of the planet. He turned to his squad, their expressions mirroring the weariness he felt.
We push forward,
He said.
but stay vigilant. We've only just begun.
The squad nodded in unison, their movements stiff with exhaustion, but their resolve unbroken. As they pressed onward, the ever-growing influence of chaos seemed to follow them, a shadow of death and corruption that would not be easily escaped. Tiberius felt the cold grip of fate tighten around his heart. This was only the beginning, and already the cost was unbearable. The Ultramarines trudged forward through the putrid wasteland of Halcyon-7, every step becoming more of a battle against the very ground beneath them. The diseased landscape was alive, an extension of Nurgle's will. Fetid pools of green sludge, sickly with warp-taint, bubbled and festered around them. Tyranid biopools, filled with the remnants of the Xeno's genetic slurry, merged grotesquely with the rot of Nurgle, creating a nightmarish blend of corruption. Even the air fought against them, thick with spores that clung to their armor like a second skin, clogging ventilation systems. Brother Calidus Train cursed under his breath as his helm display flickered with warnings of system failures.
These fumes are choking my suit. Can't take much more of this.
Keep moving,
growled Tiberius. His own helm display was flashing the same alerts, the caustic atmosphere eating away at the squad's power armor.
The air itself may be poisoned, but it won't stop us.
Yet it wasn't just the terrain. Nurgle's corruption and the Tyranid spores seemed to pulse with a malign sentience, actively resisting their advance. Pools of slime rippled without warning, and mutated vines snaked out of the muck, grasping at their feet as if trying to pull them down into the abyss. Even the ground beneath them felt wrong, a festering blend of corruption and decay, every step a reminder that the very planet had turned hostile. A vox burst of static broke through the eerie silence. Tiberius winced, the interference of the planet's diseased atmosphere grinding against his nerves. He looked over to Brother Librarian Aetolus, who was breathing heavily, his helm's lenses dimmed as he fought to keep the warp whispers at bay. Every step seemed to press the weight of madness further upon them. The vox crackled again. Vornik's voice, tight with tension, whispered through.
We've sighted movement in the courtyard of the fortress, pushing forward.
But the vox, thick with interference, filled the air once more, then abruptly cut to silence. Tiberius, glancing at his brothers, a bead of worry passed between them. Something was interfering with this communications, but Tiberius gave a nod, signaling the squad to continue their advance. As they moved closer to the Fortress of Madness, something else began to creep into their minds. Something darker, more insidious than the physical decay around them. Reality itself began to warp. Brother Librarian Aetolus Cassian slowed his pace, his breathing ragged. He could feel it pressing against his psyche, the whispering tendrils of the warp trying to burrow into his mind. The foul influence of Nurgle blended with the Tyranid hive mind, creating a maddening cacophony that gnawed at the edges of his sanity.
I hear them.
Aetolus muttered, his voice strained.
They speak. From beyond. They mock us. Whisper of the end.
Tiberius shot him a sharp glance.
Hold it together, Aetolus. We need your mind sharp.
But even as Tiberius spoke, the squad could feel it. The corruption of the warp wasn't just an external force. It was seeping into their thoughts, making them question their surroundings, their mission, even their own sanity. Shadows moved where there were none, grotesque shapes flickered in their peripheral vision, and whispers curled in their ears, promising them release from the endless war if they would just let go. Tiberius tried to shake off the creeping dread gnawing at the edges of his mind. He attempted to raise Vornik on the Vox.
Vornik, respond.
Only silence. He repeated the call. Still nothing. Tiberius' gut twisted with unease. The unnatural quiet from the scouts, men who were trained to communicate even in the worst conditions, sent a shiver of dread down his spine. The idea that they had simply lost Vox communication didn't sit right with him. He glanced at the faces of his brothers, each of them feeling the same weight pressing down on them. This silence was more than just a malfunction. It was the mark of something much darker. As the squad pressed on, the effects of the warp's whispers and the sheer malevolence of the terrain began to take their toll. Every breath, every movement felt like a battle in itself. Brother Varnus gritted his teeth as his suit's medici diagnostics buzzed in alarm, warning him of the exposure to the airborne toxins and spores.
We're being worn down,
he said, his voice laced with a cold, clinical tone, though his growing fascination with the corruption was hard to hide.
The planet itself, it's feeding off our presence, drawing strength from our suffering.
Tiberius could feel it too. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the Chaos artifact pressing down on them from some unseen place, like a hand squeezing their very souls. The Ultramarines were warriors bred for endurance, but even they were beginning to feel the creeping doubt, the slow wear of their mission's impossible nature.
This planet is dead,
Tiberius muttered.
and it's trying to take us with it.
Ahead, the land became even more treacherous. Warp-tainted sludge pools stretched out in every direction, wide and deep, some bubbling with the acidic bile of Nurgle, others crawling with the vestiges of Tyranid bioforms, mangled limbs, mutated appendages, and rotting flesh still writhing as if alive. The path forward was not only difficult but dangerous. They were forced to take detours around massive, living craters that spat noxious gas, and the once sturdy ruins of Imperial outposts crumbled into dust at the lightest touch. A towering structure lay ahead, obscured by the toxic fog that swirled across the landscape. Tiberius raised his hand, signaling the squad to halt.
We'll need to navigate around this. There's no safe passage here.
But as they moved to find another route, the ground itself seemed to shift underfoot. Warp-tainted wildlife, twisted beyond recognition, lurked in the shadows. Mutated predators, bloated and diseased, watched them with glowing eyes from the twisted, blackened trees. The ground hissed and cracked beneath their boots. the landscape an unpredictable enemy in its own right. Progress slowed, and with every moment, Tiberius could feel the tension mounting. Time was slipping away, and so too were their chances of success.
Vornik, report.
Tiberius commanded, tapping into his vox link. Silence. A gnawing unease twisted in his gut.
Vornik,
He repeated, this time more urgently. But the only reply was the static hiss of a dead channel. The squad halted, and the silence weighed heavily upon them. The eerie absence of communication hung in the air, thick with the unspoken fear that had been gnawing at them since the scouts had pushed ahead. Brother Calidus Train tightened his grip on his bolter, his eyes narrowing.
This isn't right,
He muttered.
They should have checked in by now.
Attalus took a deep breath. His senses extended.
The warp. It's thicker here, like a web tightening around us.
Tiberius clenched his fist, feeling the pull of something deep within the planet, like an invisible hand wrapping itself around his mind. He knew, deep down, that this silence from Vornik was no accident. The signs were there all along. The thickening air, the warping terrain, the unexplainable malfunctions of their equipment, their hurried pace, the subtle edge in Vornik's voice as they pressed deeper into the infected land.
There's something waiting for us in the fortress,
Attalus whispered, his psychic senses attuned to the corruption that had overtaken the world.
and it's hungry.
Tiberius felt a cold dread settle in his chest. Vornik and his squad were out there, somewhere ahead in the fog of corruption. But something had gone horribly wrong. The squad pressed onward, but the tension in the air grew thicker with every step. The silence from Vornik's team hung over them like a shroud, their absence more disturbing with each passing moment. Tiberius could feel the weight of their fate pressing down on him, as if the very ground beneath his feet sought to pull him into the abyss. The eerie silence wasn't just a malfunction of the Vox. Tiberius knew it. The absence of communication wasn't a mere technical issue. It was the first tangible sign that something terrible had befallen Vornik's team.
We may not see them again.
Tiberius finally admitted, his voice grim.
We will see them, Brother-Sergeant.
Attalus replied, his tone cold.
But they may not be the same men we knew.
The implication sent a ripple of unease through the squad. None of the other Ultramarines spoke in reply, but the weight of his words settled like a hammer. The silence of the scouts was more than just a warning. It was a reminder of the insidious power lurking beneath the surface of Halcyon-7. And now, that power had claimed their brothers. Tiberius nodded, his resolve hardening. Whatever awaited them in the Fortress of Madness, they would face it as Ultramarines. But deep down, he knew the true battle had already begun. The silence weighed heavier with each step, a silence filled with unspoken dread and the realization that they were walking into the jaws of corruption. The fortress loomed closer, but so too did the weight of their own impending doom. Tiberius could feel it. Every step they took, they edged closer to the fate that had already consumed Vornik's scouts. Madness, decay, death. It was all inevitable.
Stay sharp.
Tiberius muttered through the Vox, but the confidence in his voice wavered. He knew what lay ahead, and the squad, though disciplined and unyielding, could sense it too. They were all marching toward their own end, whether by the blade of the enemy or the creeping hand of chaos. The hulking silhouette of the Fortress of Madness loomed ahead, its blackened, twisted spires clawing at the ashen sky like skeletal fingers. As Tiberius led the Ultramarines toward the courtyard, the eerie silence of Vornik's scout squad weighed heavily on his mind. His Vox commands had gone unanswered for too long. Suddenly the ground trembled beneath their boots, and a screeching roar echoed through the ruined wasteland. From the shattered buildings around them, Tyranid hormagaunts poured forth in a seething, chittering swarm, razor-sharp talons glistening with acidic ichor. Leading the charge was a monstrous Tyranid warrior, its towering form silhouetted against the gloom, eyes glowing with mindless hunger.
Contact!
Shouted Brother Kalida's train, raising his heavy bolter as the air filled with the sound of gunfire. Explosive rounds tore through the ranks of the oncoming horde, but for every hormagaunt felled, 2 more surged forward, relentless in their pursuit of blood. Tiberius raised his power sword, its blade crackling with energy.
Form up, hold the line.
He bellowed over the din of the battlefield. The Ultramarines shifted into a defensive formation. Bolters roared to life, cutting down wave after wave of the Tyranid swarm. But still, they came. An unending tide of death and destruction. The Tyranid warrior charged forward, its scything talons raised high, seeking to rend armor and flesh alike. With a deafening roar, it smashed into the squad, scattering Marines like ragdolls. Tiberius met the creature head-on, his power sword clashing with its talons in a spray of sparks. Every inch toward the fortress was paid for in blood. The hormagaunts swarmed around the Ultramarines, tearing into the armored giants with savage ferocity. Brother Kalida's train, his heavy bolter thundering, was knocked to the ground by a horde of clawing Xenos. He rolled to his feet, crushing a hormagaunt's skull beneath his boot. But even he could see the odds were dire.
We're being overrun,
shouted Varnus, his voice strained as he fired off bolter rounds at close range, the screeching of Tyranid bioforms filling the air. The Ultramarines were expending their ammunition and resources at a rapid pace, and the Tyranids seemed endless.
We push forward.
Tiberius snarled, severing the arm of the Tyranid warrior with a sweeping strike of his power sword.
No retreat.
But the reality was sinking in. The Tyranid swarms were overwhelming, and the squad's progress toward the fortress was slow, each step fought for in blood and sweat. The realization dawned on them. This was only the beginning. The true horrors still lay within the fortress of madness, and if they struggled so much here, what awaited them deeper within? The Tyranid warrior, though wounded, continued its assault, its remaining talons striking out with terrifying speed. It knocked Tiberius back, the force of the blow sending him skidding across the ruined earth. His power sword sparked against the stone, but he rose again, resolute.
We must break through.
Tiberius roared, rallying his brothers. But as more hormagaunts surged forward, even he felt the weight of their task pressing down on him. Finally, after what felt like hours of brutal combat, the Tyranid warrior fell, its massive form crashing to the ground with a final guttural scream. The Ultramarines stood victorious, but the cost was evident. Bloodied, battered, and nearly out of ammunition, the squad regrouped amidst the carnage. The bodies of the fallen Tyranids lay scattered, their alien blood mingling with the filth and rot of Nurgle's corrupted landscape.
Is this what awaits us inside?
Varnus muttered under his breath, gazing up at the fortress. The imposing structure loomed ahead, a monolith of madness and death. The air around it shimmered with a sickly greenish hue, and the stench of rot was palpable, even through the filtration systems of their armor.
There's worse inside,
Tiberius replied, wiping the blood from his faceplate. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him more than ever. The Fortress of Madness held no promise of solace, only the certainty of further horrors. As the squad paused to catch their breath, Tiberius looked to the horizon, his mind racing. Vornik's squad was still silent, lost in the haze of battle. Their absence gnawed at him. They had moved ahead to scout the path to the fortress, but their silence was ominous.
They should have been here by now.
Tiberius said quietly, his voice thick with unease.
Vornik, where are you?
The physical toll of the battle was clear, but it was the emotional weight that began to bear down on the squad. Brother Apothecary Varnus lingered over the fallen Tyranids, his gaze lingering too long on the grotesque mutations that twisted their bodies.
This corruption.
Varnus whispered, running his gauntleted hand over the still warm corpse of a Hormagaunt.
The blending of Nurgle's influence with the Tyranid hive mind. It's remarkable.
Remarkable?
Tiberius snapped, turning sharply toward the apothecary. His eyes burned with intensity behind his visor.
These are our enemies, Varnus, not subjects for your fascination. Focus on the mission.
Varnus stood, his face a mask of cold indifference.
My duty is to understand this corruption, Brother Sergeant. If we do not study it, how can we hope to defeat it?
Tiberius stepped closer, his voice a low growl.
We defeat it with steel and faith, not curiosity. We are Ultramarines. We serve the Emperor, and we fight for his will.
But even as Tiberius spoke, he could see the flicker of doubt in Varnus's eyes. The apothecary's growing obsession with the mutation was dangerous, and Tiberius knew it. He had seen too many brothers fall to the temptations of chaos. He would not allow it to happen here.
Stay focused, Varnus,
Tiberius warned, turning his attention back to the looming fortress.
The worst is yet to come.
And as the squad prepared to advance, the silence from Vornik's squad hung over them like a shadow. Whatever lay ahead, they knew they were already walking in the footsteps of their fallen brothers.
Thank you so much for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you thought. Thanks. Commentary at the end. Alright, I don't have a ton to say. Like I said, I'm gonna start putting all the commentary kind of in the in a comment at the bottom. This story has one more part to it, and then I'll release it all together. I hope you liked it. I maybe could have cut out a few parts, honestly. I think it was a little too descriptive or meandering. It was a little too meandering on the, like describing how the ground is, and the planet is like morphing and changing and stuff. I just really wanted to emphasize it, but now looking back on it, after hearing it for 4 times in a row, it's too much. But the video's made, so I'm not taking it out. But so. I'm just saying that is a fault of mine. I tend to meander a lot, and that's a problem, but I'm working on it. Yeah, so please like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for the final part. And I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the other content too. Please let me know if you have a story in mind, because I would love to take your idea. No, yeah, okay. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much. Good night, good night. Have a good night. Or good lunch. Or good dinner. Or good this or that. I'm just talking a lot now. Good night. I'm going to sleep. Thank you so much. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.